Hey y'all, it's Jonathan and I'm back with another video, and this is my first book review of the year 2023. 2022 was such an interesting year for me. It felt heavy. It felt like a year where I didn't have as much direction in terms of my reading and I just needed to find comfort. So I relied heavily on just fiction, books that didn't really necessarily have a lot of substance, which isn't a bad thing. But I also read a lot of romance and I enjoyed a lot of that romance. But in 2023, going into this new year, I knew I really needed to set the tone for my year with a good, solid nonfiction text. And so when I heard that James Baldwin's The Evidence of Things Not Seen was being reissued with a new foreword, I knew I had to pick up that book. And when I did, and I read the first couple of pages, I was like, this is it. This is exactly what I need to set the tone for my year, to cause me to reflect, to cause me to sort of get back to where I really want to get to in terms of discussing social issues and discussing what's going on in the world around me and the world around us. So I'm really excited to finally sit down and talk about James Baldwin's The Evidence of Things Not Seen. I've posted a couple of things on social media, and so I knew I just needed to sit in front of the camera and really get all of these feelings out. So if you're interested in hearing my review of James Baldwin's The Evidence of Things Not Seen, keep watching and let's get right into this video. From 1979 to 1989, 24 Black children were killed in the city of Atlanta by what has long thought to be a serial killer. In 1982, a young Black man by the name of Wayne Williams was convicted of killing 2 men. But prosecutors relied heavily on the possible connection between him and the Atlanta children's murders in order to get a conviction. James Baldwin actually left the comfort of his home, which he had resided in for about 3 decades at this point, in order to investigate these murders. He stated in the preface of The Evidence of Things Not Seen, "Walter Lowe of Playboy wrote to me, to my home in France, suggesting that I go to Atlanta to do a story concerning the missing and, as it evolved, murdered children. I have been following the story, what there was, that is, in the foreign press, to follow. It is not so easy to follow a story occurring in one's own country from the vantage point of another one. But Baldwin seemingly knew exactly what he was returning to. After all, what I remembered or imagined myself to remember," he said, "of my life in America was terror. And terror indeed did he return to." In the year 2023, James Baldwin's last book, The Evidence of Things Not Seen, was reissued with a new foreword from Stacey Abrams, political leader and New York Times bestselling author. I do find this to be a particularly interesting choice considering who winds up catching a lot of heat in this text, but we'll get into that in a minute. In The Evidence of Things Not Seen, James Baldwin offers a searing reflection on particularly this case, questioning the conviction by way of public opinion of Wayne Williams, and also critiques Atlanta's Black administration. He says, "The presence of Black administration, as distinguished perhaps from an incontestable actuality, proved that the city too busy to hate, as Atlanta was called, could not be accused of administering Southern justice. It proved nothing of the sort, not only because Atlanta belongs to the state of Georgia, but because Georgia belongs to the United States." James Baldwin really goes hard into this idea that progress is made due to the greater presence of Black people within politics. And this particularly felt so real in 2023. I mean, we've had so many people, so many firsts, newly elected Black officials. I think that it's always interesting the way that people see that as progress. People see that representation immediately as a sign of progress. James Baldwin goes even deeper into this topic. He says, "The optimistic ferocity of this cosmetic job is the principal, if not the only reason, for the presence in some cities of the Black mayor. It is absolutely safe to say that this phenomenon is, on the part of the Republic, cynical. It is a concession masking the face of power, which remains white. The presence of these beleaguered Black men, some of whom, after all, putting it brutally, may or may not be for sale, threatens the power of the Republic far less than would be their absence. Cities, in any event, are controlled by the states, and these United States are controlled by the real aspirations of Washington. All governments, without exception, make only those concessions deemed absolutely necessary for the status quo. And if one really wishes to know how highly this public esteems Black freedom, one has only to watch the American performance in the world. And while this connects particularly to the context of the evidence of things not seen, because the mayor at this time was Maynard Jackson, a Black man and Atlanta's first Black mayor. Jackson worked hard to integrate the police force. And even so, at this time, a Black police chief actually oversaw the investigation of the Atlanta children murders. To even draw this point even further, at Wayne Williams' trial, a Black judge is the one who sentenced him to life. I would encourage everyone to check out the article when James Baldwin wrote about the Atlanta child murders from the New Yorker. Baldwin continues to highlight what was seen as progress. Having Black faces in high places did not equate to anything more than maintaining the status quo. The victims of this crime, all Black, all poor, mostly young boys, never received the justice that they deserved. Never received the rigorous investigation that would have been given had they been white. With the sentencing of Wayne Williams for these two murders came the end of this case. I think that what I really connected with about the evidence of things not seen is what we're currently dealing with the case of Tyre Nichols. And I couldn't help but just think about the entire current discussion of the murder of Tyre Nichols at the hand of 5 Black police officers. Baldwin spoke about being guided around Atlanta by the Black Atlanta police force. He first thinks of his time growing up. Black policemen were another matter, he says. We used to say, if you must call a policeman, for we hardly ever did, for God's sake, try to make sure it's a white one. A Black policeman could completely demolish you. And so I really couldn't help but think about Tyre Nichols as Baldwin spoke about being guided around Atlanta by Atlanta's Black police force. He gives a little bit of historical context. In 1948 is when the first African-American officers actually hit the streets and went on duty. And by 1955, there were 15 Black police officers on the police force. But when they were first hired, they were not permitted to arrest white people. Then Baldwin actually makes a connection to the present. He states, when I tried to compare their situation in Atlanta now with the situation I remember from my youth in Harlem, I found myself facing a void icier than the mere passage of time. The cops I remembered had known what the community felt about them, and it hadn't seemed to matter. Here, they knew too, that many elements of the community distrusted them, but the knowledge seemed to sting. And so we arrive in 2023, where nothing really has changed, other than the system expanding right along with that distrust. Though these feelings may sting those Black and brown police officers who joined the force to allegedly make a change, it doesn't sting enough for them to remove themselves from that system. That system that is inherently racist. We have arrived in 2023, and a young Black man is used as a human pinata for those police officers. According to the family Nichols attorney, he said, it was an unadulterated, unabashed, nonstop beating of this young boy for 3 minutes. That is what we saw in the video. And I was unable to watch it. I turned it on for all of 10 seconds, and the sheer brutality, it really looked like a bunch of people jumping a young man. That is nothing that I want protecting me. The evidence of things not seen felt so eerie. It really did. And it was hard for me to find a word, but I really could only say it felt eerie. It was eerie for the simple fact that Baldwin's words fit too perfectly into the year 2023. James Baldwin actually cries. The words sound now so beautifully naive, so trusting. For we felt then, or rather the people who were handling me felt then, that we had only to prove our worth, and no one could deny our right to live in our country as free as all other citizens. The evidence of things not seen it's just a dose of reality. It's the dose of reality that I think that we really need. A dose of reality amongst all of these super hopeful writings. A dose of reality amongst all of these hopeful writings marketed as anti-racist literature that really just coddle white readers and offer false hope to Black. I always feel like I gotta speak freely about these topics because even after the death of Tyree Nichols, I read through all of these statements. And I'm not going to call out particular organizations and groups, but I read all of these statements. These statements by Black organizations, white organizations, statements by the President of the United States, statements by the VP, statements by all of these politicians, Democrat and Republican. And all of them just felt so hollow. All they did was employ the same language of we need reform. Or they tried to invoke the words of Martin Luther King and talk about peace. But all of that just feels so hollow. People even had the audacity to say that they saw progress, and that even with all of the progress we made, it's sad to see this happen. And I'm just like, where is this progress? James Baldwin said, others may see American progress in economic, racial, and social affairs. I do not. Baldwin didn't sugarcoat. He didn't naively believe that he would see progress in his own lifetime. But he did tell us directly that there needs to be a change. There needs to be a change or we're just going to continue to fail our children. Just like those that were murdered in Atlanta. Murdered in Atlanta and never saw a modicum of justice or what could be considered justice. Or even the others that aren't counted in that 24 that disappeared and no one cared. If we don't do something, we will continue to fail people like Wayne Williams, who Baldwin even said must be added to the list of those slaughtered Black children. A Black man that was held in legalized bondage. It's interesting that Baldwin took this stance, even though Wayne Williams was charged with these 2 murders. Baldwin still took this chance to say that Wayne Williams is still a victim because a system that did not care about Black children allowed a man to go to prison just so that they could close that case. He was a victim of this justice system, a victim of this prison system, and it's sad. And he still is in prison. And is still held to be the culprit in this case. They aren't looking for anybody else. We will continue to fail ourselves. So there really just must be a radical change. And we're all responsible for that. One of my favorite quotes, and I actually have a pen that has this quote on it. It says, history, I contend, is the present. We, with every breath we take, every move we make, our history, and what goes around comes around. And so I think that reading The Evidence of Things Not Seen just confirmed everything that I have been feeling. And I don't think that it is wrong I love the idea of being hopeful and wanting to look at the bright side, and wanting to sort of just like exist, and I understand taking care of our mental health. I understand, trying to avoid these harmful images, these violent images of Black death. But I think that there are so many people that have gotten so comfortable ignoring it. I think that there are so many people that have gotten so comfortable not talking about it. And they use the idea that not talking about it is just like, them trying to protect their peace. But we got a crazy world going on around us. And we got to do something about it. I think that there is a certain level of privilege in being able to ignore what's going on around you. To be able to sort of like distance yourself from this. And I'm a person that, I have to look kids in the face every single day. Black kids in the face every single day. And I've lost some of my students. And it hurts. And I fear for them. And I really do fear for them. And so James Baldwin just woke me up with this book. And so I would encourage everybody to go pick up The Evidence of Things Not Seen. I think this is something that you need to read. I think this is something that everybody needs to read. Because it's just like, James Baldwin wrote this in 1983. It's been 40 years. And the words still feel a little too accurate for my liking. Okay? So, I hope you all enjoyed this review of The Evidence of Things Not Seen by James Baldwin. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you picked this up. Did you read it before the reissue? I will see y'all in the next review. And always remember that you are loved.